The Knicks coaching search is a fiasco, or is it? I don't know who they're going to hire, but there's one guy that would be an absolute disaster. And we'll talk on this episode with the fantastic Chris Carlin. It's all right now on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome in episode number 15 of Gordon Damer on Sports. As always, if you've not already, please hit that subscribe button. It really does go a long way. So look, we got a lot to do on this episode. We'll get into the Knicks coaching search. One name that is being floated by some that would be an outright disaster. And of course, as I said, we're going to talk with Chris Carlin from ESPN Radio, the voice of Rutgers football, and so much more. But before we get into all that, last episode, we discussed the former Oakland A's and how their move eventually to Las Vegas is no sure bet. And after that episode was uploaded, something came across my timeline that I did want to add. And as if the A's did not have enough going against them, The Athletic, the online website with the New York Times, not to be confused with the Athletics baseball team, but The Athletic, they conduct an annual anonymous poll of players every spring. They recently released it. They interviewed over 100 players, number of questions, but one question jumped out, and it was which organization has a good reputation or bad reputation among players. No surprise, the good reputation, Dodgers were number one, Yankees were number two, the Braves, they were all at the top. But the worst, you guessed it, the A's, 39 out of 126 responses, more than the White Sox. Now keep in mind, this poll took place in the spring, a year after the White Sox lost 120 games, and before the season where the Rockies this year might turn out to be the worst team in the history of baseball. So even despite those epic failures, the A's still ranked dead last. Pretty impressive. Another aspect of that move, if it does happen, was brought up in that survey, and it was in regard to how the sports betting public and how fans now treat players. The Athletic asked the question, has legalized sports betting changed how fans treat you and your teammates? A whopping 78% said yes. Almost 80% of people asked. It feels like getting 78% of anyone to agree on anything these days is next to impossible. One player told the survey that he has muted the words parlay on his Twitter feed and social media accounts. Others have deleted their social media and called it the best decision they ever made. One AL reliever, anonymous of course, said that he's concerned about violent retaliation when the A's eventually move to Vegas. He told The Athletic, quote, I think there's going to be some security risk or personnel risk. Someone's going to lose a bunch of money and track someone down in the parking lot, especially if the A's move to Vegas with live betting. It could get pretty serious, end quote. Now, look, I don't know that the Vegas move really has that much to do with it anymore. Online gambling is everywhere nationwide. You don't have to be on the strip to place a bet. But what has really changed is the dynamic between fans and players. And it feels like the combination of gambling and social media certainly do not mix. There's less empathy. There's more entitlement. Players are not athletes anymore. They're part of your bet slip. They're part of your fantasy lineup. And when that's the lens you view sports through, it warps the relationship. Mike Tyson put it best, social media made you all way too comfortable with disrespecting someone and not getting punched in the face for it. It feels like that's exactly what's happening. But it's another angle of the A's move, and it ties into the common theme of disconnection between teams and fans, between players and communities, and ultimately between the games that we love and the people who view them. All right, let's move on to the Knicks coaching search because a lot has been written and said about the fact that we're coming up on, 2 weeks since Tom Thibodeau was fired, and the Knicks are still searching for his replacement. The fact that the plan, at least so far, has been to look at people who don't have any interest in the job or already have a job. There's no other way to put it. That's not a great optic. If the idea was to fire Tom to land someone who can take the team to the next level, well, I'm open to hearing that. But you should have that person in mind and have some details worked out by now. With the way the Knicks are going about it, it seems like they feel like just about anyone could do a better job than Tibbs. And to me, that's insulting. So for Knicks fans who are saying, why is it a big deal? They don't have a coach yet. Well, it's not just a typical coaching search. What you're doing is you fired a successful coach who got you to the deepest part of the playoffs than you've been in 25 years. If you have a replacement who would be better, that's great. But it seems like the Knicks think the list of improvements on Tibbs is a long list, and that's troublesome to put that first part second. Now, to me, that's not the biggest concern, because I'm sure at some point they will get a respectable head coach, and then we'll find out if it's an improvement or not. No, to me, the main concern is still whose idea was it to fire Tibbs in the first place, because the more time passes, the more this feels off. It feels impulsive, it feels reactionary, and frankly, it does not feel like in line with how Leon Rose has run this organization since taking over. Leon Rose, in his time, has operated behind the scenes, quiet, strategic, doesn't chase headlines, doesn't talk to the media, but he doesn't panic. No leaks. He's deliberate. So it seems strange that they would make this reactionary move after getting to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in more than 2 decades. But if this was Leon's move, fine. Maybe he thinks Tibbs' system has a ceiling. Maybe the players were part of that as well. Maybe he believes it's time to evolve and hand the keys to a different coach who can grow the roster. That's fine. That's at least a logical basketball conversation. But if this was more about Jim Dolan pulling the trigger, if this came from the top, that to me is a whole different ballgame. That's not basketball. That's back to the dysfunction. That's history repeating itself in the worst way possible. Because when Dolan gets involved, we know how that goes. So if Dolan forced this, the next hire to me is already compromised. And this Knicks job comes with some major negatives for whoever takes it. You walk in the door knowing that the expectation for next season is a championship. So they don't need to add in an impulsive owner questioning every decision. But it seems like that's going to be part of the mix. But I'm not panicking yet. I'm not going down this is the Knicks back to the old ways just yet. Let's find out who the coach is before we start jumping off the ship. But I do have to say, this is starting to have some Donnie Walsh parallels. This has the feeling of a guy who was turning around the organization just up until the moment the owner felt like he had to put his 2 cents in. And if that's the case, the Knicks have not changed nearly as much as we think they have. Now, another angle of this Knicks coaching search, and one that really doesn't have to do with the Knicks or Leon Rose or anything, because this name has not been floated realistically by the team, and that name is Mark Jackson. It feels like Mark Jackson's name comes up fairly regularly whenever there's a high-profile coaching change, especially one with the Knicks. And in the last week or two, several big names have pushed for the idea. Rick Pitino has said Mark Jackson would be a good fit. Shaquille O'Neal has said he would be a good fit. Stephen A. Smith threw his support behind him. Former player, head coaching experience, a New York guy. And they've latched onto, at least Stephen A. did, the idea, this narrative, that Mark Jackson built the Golden State Warriors dynasty, and Steve Kerr just came in and reaped the rewards. He piggybacked off of Mark Jackson's success. It's a good narrative. The only problem is it's completely not true. And if the Knicks were ever to buy into that narrative, they would be making a massive mistake. Yes, Mark Jackson was with Golden State before they won, and is the number one factor that held the Warriors back from winning. Mark Jackson had Steph and Clay and Draymond and Andre Iguodala and Harrison Barnes. They were all there. In 3 full seasons as the head coach, he won 1 playoff series. 1. And the year he got fired, the Warriors lost in the first round. Steve Kerr then walks in the following year, doesn't blow up the roster, doesn't make massive trades to impact the roster in any way. He just simply installs a modern offense, ball movement, pace. And look at that. What do? They win 67 regular season games and an NBA championship in the first year. That's not a coincidence. That's a coaching upgrade. It's not some magic Steve Kerr pulled with Jackson's blueprint. He took that blueprint and he threw it out. It was what Jackson failed to do that held them back. His offense was outdated, slow-paced, minimal spacing. He had 2 of the greatest shooters in the history of basketball, and they were stuck in an offense that looked like it was designed in the 90s. So let me get this straight for all the people suggesting Mark Jackson. You just fired Tom Thibodeau because you believed he wasn't getting enough out of the Knicks roster offensively. And your big idea is to bring in the guy who made Steph Curry look ordinary. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a good plan to me. In fact, it seems like a terrible idea. And look, Jackson's shortcomings weren't just on the court. Those were significant enough, and they are the biggest factor. But behind the scenes, in some ways, he was even worse. Mark Jackson didn't just burn bridges in Golden State. He took a flamethrower to the whole organization. He clashed with assistant coaches. He alienated executives. He had problems with players. He created a paranoid locker room culture where everyone was out to get him. Even the owner, Joe Lacob, said publicly Jackson couldn't get along with anyone in the organization. It wasn't just one disagreement. It was the entire building. Now, again, how do you think that would fly at Madison Square Garden with Leon Rose and James Dolan looming? Again, I don't get the feeling that would be a good mix. I don't think it would be a good mix anywhere, but certainly not at the Garden. But there's a reason why Mark Jackson never got another head coaching opportunity. Head coaches generally get recycled, especially if you've had any success, and Jackson did have some. But with Jackson, it's never just about basketball. During his time in Golden State, there was a ton of tension that stemmed from his religious beliefs, and not the beliefs themselves, but how he imposed them on others. There were bizarre stories about him anointing Steph Curry's ankles with holy water and Bible quotes in every locker room speech. And people who did not share his exact worldview, he looked at those people as enemies. So for anyone who's suggesting that Mark Jackson should get this opportunity, what exactly are you basing that on? You want to replace Tibbs, who is too stuck in his ways, with a guy who is concreted into his ways. He doesn't evolve, and when challenged, he circles the wagons instead of looking at himself. So Mark Jackson is not the guy who built the Warriors. He's the guy who kept the Warriors from becoming the Warriors. And that fact is not disputable. They would never have been the Warriors if Mark Jackson stayed on there. Also, one final thing, this idea that the Knicks need to hire a New York guy is nonsense. They don't need someone who is from here just because they're from here. They need the best coach for the job. Heck, the organization doesn't care about the media anyway. Leon Rose could be weekend at Bernie's, and we'd never know it. He never talks. The next head coach should be hired based on his philosophies, based on his coaching strategies, not because of his zip code. And they certainly should not hire someone who did not evolve with the times while he was coaching and has not done that in more than a decade. This is not about nice storylines. It's about winning. The Knicks need a forward-thinking coach, not a symbolic one. And you know how bad an idea Mark Jackson would be? The Knicks have been linked to 10 people so far who have turned them down. And even on the Knicks list, Mark Jackson is not on it. All right, now we're joined by a man who is the co-host of Bart and Carlin, the voice of Rutgers football, proud pants wearer and baldness survivor, the one and only Chris Carlin. Chris, man, thanks for popping on with us.
What's up, Gordon, man? Good to be with you.
All right, well, we got a lot of stuff to cover, but the first thing is the show with Bart. You're back in the saddle with your old partner. What has it been like getting at least one part of the old band back together?
Yeah, it's been good. You know, it's Bart, you forget sometimes about some of the idiosyncrasies and how much he just kind of flies by the seat of his pants, so to speak, and lets it go. But it's great to be back with him. He's, you know, Bart was so much fun to work with the first time around, and to get a chance to do it again is kind of a blessing. It's been cool. I think that the thing that people don't necessarily know about Bart Scott is that he truly is 100% of himself all the time. And it's just something that I absolutely love about him. So it's been very cool to be back.
Now, technically, you are local again, as opposed to national. Is there any difference between local and national anymore? Or is
yeah.
Oh, is there?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
To me, there is, yeah.
I always feel like New York, everything's national. You know what I mean? Like anything that's going on, you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I get it. I think the biggest difference is, you know, we get so locked into all of the little things in when you do local, like, you know, the seventh inning of last night and what the Mets are doing and all that. You know, what the heck is Mendoza doing or anything like that. But you know, I just think there are things. Look at the NBA Finals. Like, we haven't spent much time talking about the NBA Finals, whereas if I was doing national radio, we would certainly be talking about it a whole lot more. So I think New York and local really lets you get into the nitty gritty of things. And whereas when you're doing it nationally, it's not all surface area. You can get deep into it, but not nearly as much as you can when you're working in just in just New York. So, and obviously this is where I came up in radio. So it's been pretty cool to be back.
So do you miss talking about the Cowboys every 5 seconds?
I do not.
is the national Dallas Cowboys on the local scene? Is that Aaron Boone? What's the local equivalent to the Dallas Cowboys?
I don't know if there is one. I don't, man, like, it's so funny, Gordon. Like, it used to be the Yankees, right? It just, in the old days at FAN, you never even had to do much to get the phone calls lit up. You get on the air and mention the word Yankees, and the next thing you know, the phones are lit. Same thing with the Mets, now it's like, it's not quite at that same level as it is with the Cowboys nationally, with the Lakers, with teams like that. But, I think obviously New York still loves its baseball, but it's at a different kind of level now. And I think that's just with the younger audiences now kind of connecting with it.
I feel like with baseball, I have load management, like it's hard for me to get worked up on a random Tuesday when, you know that the Yankees are almost certainly going to go to the playoffs. The Mets are almost certainly going to go to the playoffs. So it's kind of hard to, back in the 90s when the Yankees, they didn't have the wild cards, the Yankees were not the juggernaut that they are now in terms of making the playoffs every year. It was a far different animal.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's right. It's hard to get worked up for this at the moment in those individual moments, but it is still the passion is still there in it. Now, I think when you look back and you try to figure out what's going to get you fired up individually in each moment and day by day, it's so much in the NFL now that's not a problem. Like, the NFL is such a year-round thing now, and I think that's become an even bigger part of it too. But it's funny. We kind of had the same thing with the Knicks for a bit because they were just stuck in that 3 spot. You knew they weren't moving up or down, and so there was a good 2 months where it virtually didn't mean anything until they finally got to the postseason. And I found it hard to get really into the nitty gritty of the team at that point. And I think we didn't really find out enough about it until the playoffs finally rolled around.
Yeah. So let's get to it. Knicks coaching situation. Is it the mess that it looks like right now?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, here's what's bothersome. If you're going to do this, you assume that there's some sort of plan in place. And the fact that they have gone and maybe they're collecting names, trying to figure out who they're going to be able to talk to and all that. Like, this was clearly not to me. If not Thibodeau, then it's definitively this guy. No, it's not Thibodeau anymore.
Yeah.
And I have trouble with that. When that is the thought process with somebody who just got you to the conference finals, I don't know how you argue with that kind of success, but at the same, think about this. This is the best run of Knicks basketball in 30 years, in 25 to 30 years. And we're still just tossing it aside. And so now, because, whether it was Bridges, whether it was Towns or whoever didn't love playing for him, now we're changing this up. I don't get it. I think this is a Dolan decision, but it's not not what I would call like a reckless Dolan decision. I would call this more of a decision that clearly they did not have their guy in mind or back channeled or any of that. Like, this is going to be our guy. Now if I hear the name James Borrego, my head's going to explode. And yet I feel like I'm going to hear that name here in the next couple of weeks, and you're going to go further down the list.
Yeah. And to me, that's the only question right now. Is this a Leon move or was this a move by the owner? And the more that time goes by, it feels like, well, look, Leon, he moves in silence, right? Like, the big moves with Leon, you don't see them coming until they happen. This move feels like it was impulsive and was reactionary. And those kind of adjectives point to one person, and it's not Leon Rose.
Right. And I listen, whether or not Leon was on board with it, when I read and hear the reports that James Dolan is leading the meetings with the players and Leon is kind of taking a secondary role, and Dolan is there asking the questions, it's pretty clear Dolan was never the biggest Thibodeau fan. So even with that being the case, I guess I would look at it this way, Gordon. If we had in our job, if we, hired somebody and things were going well, and then you go to your boss and say, listen, I want to extend this guy for 3 more years and pay him $30 million.
Right.
And then the next year, before the extension had even kicked in, I want to go to my boss and say, that 30 million, would you mind eating it?
Yeah.
Because it's not the guy. Like, to me, that just tells me it's not a Leon Rose. It's not a Leon Rose decision at all when that's the case.
And do you think the Knicks have overvalued themselves here with the fact that it feels like they're just looking at guys who are already coaching teams or have no interest in coaching? It almost feels like at this point, they feel like it's not just a guy that could replace Tibbs. It almost feels like they feel like anybody can replace Tibbs and do a better job.
Well, see, that's the problem. What has been proven right too many times is there have been coaches who can only get you so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody else comes in and they're able to take you over the top. The Warriors with Steve Kerr, you can go on and on. There's a whole list. And, the Ime Udoka thing was a different thing, but Missoula came in and wins a championship. So maybe are we starting to get more baseball related where the manager doesn't matter as much? Well, it clearly mattered enough for you to make a change here after you just had a lot of success. So I don't think you can hire just anybody for this job in particular, especially when you are the one taking the slings and arrows every day. It's not Leon Rose. It's a mystery when he ever is going to speak to the media again.
Might not ever again for all we know, right?
And I got to tell you, I kind of admire the strategy by the Garden. Just why do I need to talk? There's no league mandate for me to talk. I'm not going to talk. Silence is golden for Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So I don't really blame him from that standpoint, but I guess just for me, you just want to believe that if you're going to make a move like this, you have your guy that you have a lot of confidence in is going to take you off the top. And this right now, over the top, and this right now is looking like an average coaching search. It's like a coaching search of a team that just fired somebody after going 30-52. That's not what this was.
It kind of gives me the whole flashback to the Donnie Walsh time, right? Like the guy comes in here, you start to see it turn around. Now it's turned around more than it did with Walsh, but just when it felt like, hey, Donnie Walsh has got this on the right trip and the right track, here comes James Dolan to force a trade for Melo, trade everyone away and kind of sabotage what was the rebuild at that time. I don't know that it'll be the same thing here because it's a better roster overall, but it can't leave you in a good place if you're a Knicks fan.
No, but you know what? I'm kind of done with the hand wringing of, at the same time, while I think it was a Dolan call, I'm not going to get caught up in the fact that he's doing this. Clearly he can do it. It's his team and the money is still pouring in. So why does he have to listen to anybody else? So I'm not going to wring my hands over that. And that may not be what a Knicks fan wants to hear. But at the same time, like, this is kind of the reality that you're dealing in. So with that being the case, you can just pray. Like the last time around, they made the right decisions with who they hired. You just pray that with this roll of the dice, you end up in the same situation.
All right, so the Knicks are as good as they've been in 30 years. I don't know if it's 30 years that we go back that far.
25.
But, yeah, but Mike and the back then, 25 years ago, you were still producing Mike and the Mad Dog, right?
Yep.
Did you have any idea what you were getting into? Take us through that decision when you first found out that you were going to be producing and working with them and what that was like at that time.
So I worked on the show as the board operator for 6 months, but I was 24 years old. This is 1997. And, I got the producer at the time, a guy named Bob Gelb, told me, hey, I'm leaving and I think you could do this job. And I was the kid driving for the drugstore and driving around and listening to them all day, So I'm like, what? And it was overwhelming to really ever get comfortable. I don't think I ever got comfortable doing that job, but it was nuts. And the opportunities that afforded me, like thinking about that, like I think about like some of the trips that we went on with the Knicks that, it had its good and it's bad. Like I went to the NBA Finals to watch the Knicks play the Spurs. I missed a lot of the third quarter of one of the games because I was in the Alamo Dome looking for ice cream for Mike, and I couldn't find it. So that was like there were trade-offs there.
Right. Is there still a story that people ask you about during that time?
I mean, there are a few. There's one in particular that always comes to mind, and it was traveling with the Knicks. It was in Indianapolis in I think it was 2000.
Was that the fight one?
It was the series they lost the next year. And so we went there, and Mike's hotel room was not ready yet. Chris's was.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're sitting on the couch in this little mini suite hotel room. And I came back from downstairs. I've been checking to see if Mike's room was ready. And I walk into the room, and they're watching the movie The Horse Whisperer. It's got just the two of them are sitting there on the couch. And it's now I've never seen the movie, but I know that's what it was. And it's Robert Redford and Kristen Scott Thomas. So I walk in the room, and I turn to Mike. I said, "Listen, Mike, hotel room's not ready." Shh. Okay.
That should be on the movie poster to get people to go see it.
Exactly. Dramatic scene. I guess Redford is breaking up with Kristen Scott Thomas at this point in this movie. And scene ends, and Dog turns to Mike, and he goes, "Mike, listen, he had to break up with that woman. She is lost. She had no idea what she is doing. That woman is lost in her life. Please." And Mike turns, "Absolutely right move."
So it was just like on the air.
I just walked out of the room because it was like we were talking about Game 5 in the Knicks Pacers.
Now, was that the same year as the disagreement over the travel stuff, and Mike went back to the studio? And
I think it was
because that was like the first big fight,
games
right?
1 and 2
Mm-hmm.
that we went to. Yes, it was the same year because when the Horse Whisperer thing happened, it was like before Game 1. That was going back for Game 5. And so that was a thing where we go to the airport, it's LaGuardia, flights canceled. So they have to change our flight to go to Indianapolis through Washington. And they didn't have first class for Mike. And Mike's like, "I'm not doing this. I'm not going to Indiana." Remember, he had a bad knee at the time too. And so he's like, "I'm not doing this. We're not going, blah, blah, blah." And Chris is annoyed. Chris wanted to be there. So we go back to the studio, and Chris is like, so he's a little on edge. And then Knicks lost that game, I believe. And next day, Chris is really going after Van Gundy. And Van Gundy was kind of Mike's guy at the time. So that really lit the fuse on this fight that really just was about a lot of other things. But it kind of happened out of that game. So that was definitely that's obviously in those conference finals, I think. They lost to the Pacers, and that's in June. And I'm just thinking, like, this is going to, this thing is not getting better. They were screaming and yelling at each other. And finally, it had been going on for a few days, and vacations come. And like there was a point in an argument where, Mike said, "When summer's over, I'm not working with him again." And Chris said something like, "I just signed a new contract, Mike, so don't let the door hit you in the ass," So that's where we left it. And, I saw them both throughout the summer because they always staggered their vacations. And I thought the show was over. I definitely thought the show was over. But what saved it is Mike's wife-to-be invited Chris to the wedding unbeknownst to Mike that summer. And so Chris was kind of surprised that he got invited. It was a very small wedding, and shows up, and they both at one point kind of had a chat for a few minutes at the wedding. It was kind of a superficial chat, beautiful wedding, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And at the end of it, like that really kind of led to them mending their fences. It was unbelievable. It's Mike's wife, who really saved the show at that point. And that was in the summer of 2000.
Were there other blowups before the eventual breakup, or was that the big one and things would pop up every once in a while, or was that the beginning?
Things would pop up, but it was never like that. Yeah, never at that level, at least that I had been through. With Bob, I think in the first 8 years before I was around, there were things that had certainly happened that,
Look,
like
strong personalities, absolutely. That's going to happen.
yes, and they
Sure.
didn't really want to be working together at first to begin with.
Right.
So, but they couldn't deny what happened so quickly in terms of the ratings that they had to get into it, and it was going to change their lives both in an incredible way. So, you make it happen for as long as you can until Chris decided in 2008 to move on to Sirius XM.
So we're talking about everything involving your career. You're involved with Rutgers football. I think has it been a decade now you've been calling Rutgers? How long have you been doing that?
A lot longer.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. This is my 25th year.
Oh my God.
Network.
I'm so far off. I am since COVID, I am all over the map.
There's no concept of time anymore. That doesn't exist.
I'm saying 10 years. It's been 20. It's been more than double.
Yeah, it's a 20. This is my 22nd year calling the games. I did 3 years as a sideline reporter first, but yeah, it's been like, trust me, I appreciate the fact he thought it was only 10 years because it does not make me feel nearly as old as I clearly am.
So what are the realistic expectations? You lost a lot of seniors this past year, right?
Yeah. On the defensive side, especially, it's going to be a younger team defensively, but I think it's going to be I'm optimistic. I'm pretty optimistic from the standpoint of that defensively. Younger guys, but guys who have gotten some playing time before, not guys who are completely inexperienced. And on offense, they've got some replacing to do on the offensive line a little bit, but they've got continuity at quarterback for the first time in a while, where Ethan Kaliakmanis is going to be their guy for the second year in a row. And they've had time to develop some of the younger guys too. And so, I think they'll be like, Ethan is just a really solid, good player that you can rely on. And I think that'll be a big help.
Is this finally the year that the Jets and Giants are not going to be looking ahead to the draft by Halloween?
I mean, I was this close to cutting you off in the middle of the question to say no, but I just wanted to make sure I knew.
Right. I was going the direction you thought.
So the answer would be no. No.
Yeah.
Listen, with the Jets, I think it'll actually be better. And the Jets are kind of employing that Knicks strategy of we're not talking if we don't have to. Mm-hmm. We're not doing anything to draw any attention to ourselves. And I kind of dig that because so many times when you get a new coach, a new GM, well, they try pumping up the fans. It's a new regime. It's a new this. It's a new that, whatever. And then, that first year, you may not be ready to go and win some games. I think the Jets can be better. It's just I am very skeptical about the Fields decision. I, as a Pittsburgh fan, watched him a lot last year, and I went into that exceptionally optimistic about him and came out of it like, oh, okay, so that's what it is. So I think he'll only be okay, but if they can employ him the right way, and get him running the football a good amount, they got a chance to at least be somewhat more effective offensively. Their defense should be good. Their defense should be good again. So, it's just, you got to stay off the field. And last year it was on the field entirely too much.
With the Giants, maybe I'm crazy, but there seems to be a lot of optimism after the Jackson Dart move in the draft and all this. I'm seeing maybe they'll, kind of redshirt Dart for the entire season. Is there any way we get to the end of the season and the Giants aren't starting fresh again with a new coach at the very least?
This schedule is just, I know we're talking about this in June,
right?
We're so way out in front of this, right? But the schedule is brutal, is absolutely brutal. I mean, they've got the toughest schedule in the league compared to, based on what happened this past year. So I think that's tough. I think you look at how it sets up in the beginning. The Giants could be looking at 0-4, 1-5 quite easily to start the year. And then with Dart, he's not the guy right away. And if they can redshirt him, that's great. I think that while there's optimism, this was not a strong quarterback class. And this is why, this was not a top 5 guy right away. So I think, if we see Dart by early December, then I think, the Giants have just had another one of those seasons. But here's the thing, Gordon. I mean, you tell me. This schedule is so tough that the Giants could legitimately be better and win 5 games. Do you keep the coach at that point? Like, because the schedule is so tough, does it depend on how it all looks? Like, you win 5 games and you're clearly a better team than you were the year before. What do you do?
But can you really be a better team if at the end of the day, at some point, doesn't it come down to the things that we can actually quantify? And the only thing we can actually quantify is wins and losses. And if you're winning 5 games again, I don't know if John Mara can continue to be that patient. I know I wouldn't have been.
I think the thing about John that he hates the most right now is that he has become that owner that he never wanted to be. He never wanted to be the guy that was going to fire a guy every couple of years and be going through it. But they just, since Tom Coughlin, they have not handled the hiring well at all. And it's been problematic. And as a result, they're in this position and they have become that team, unfortunately. But what I
would say to Mara, though, of all the decisions that you fired all these people after 2 years, were any of them the wrong decision though? Would Pat Shurmur have been better with more time, or Joe Judge wouldn't be? I mean, it was clear after 2 years that these were not the right people. So I don't think patience has been the Giants' problem.
That's the thing. And I'm a little worried that this time they were patient for being patient's sake.
Yeah.
And so if you're just doing this because you don't want to be that guy, well, where are you going to be in the middle of next year? All right, so you drafted a quarterback, you traded back into the first round. It's not, a top 5 pick, but you drafted one in the first round. Then you're going to be potentially firing the coach.
Right, bringing in a new coaching staff. Right. It's a mess.
So it becomes that unfortunate self-fulfilling prophecy of continuing to find yourself in that situation.
Well, look, you have more than enough jobs, but now you have a new passion project, Carlin's Corner Table. Give me the one thing. You've got a bunch of them on TikTok and all that type of stuff. Give me the one thing that has blown you away, either in a good way or even maybe in a negative way. I like a negative review. I feel like people on TikTok are way too positive about things.
I'm very glad that you said this, because I got this from a couple of people the other day, that what they enjoy about it, and it's like anybody else of the hundreds of people doing it, but I'm not just pumping up every place I go.
That's the key.
How great it is.
Right. There's nothing worse on TikTok than people who are telling me about the show, and I watch 5 minutes of the show, and I can tell the show is terrible.
Exactly.
Oh, it's the worst.
Exactly. So what I would tell you is, yes. All right. So here you go. For instance, I went in last week really excited. Anticipatorily so, because I was going, I think Chili's is a very underrated place. And listen, we're doing this for everybody. It's not just a small little mop and pop store. But when I see that Chili's is doing something with a sauced mozzarella stick, color me intrigued.
Right.
You've got my attention. This has not been done before to my knowledge. So you got a honey chipotle on the mozzarella stick. And I'm kind of thinking, you know what? This could be great. This really could be great. So I go in, admittedly high expectations.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Or high hopes. I shouldn't say expectations, but hopes. First of all, they just dumped the chipotle sauce, the honey chipotle on it, and it's everywhere. It's all over my hands. It's a problem. Then I try the cheese pull. Not a great cheese pull. And I got to tell you, here's what I realized. And it got 3 Carlins, right? Because it's okay. I could see what they were going for, but this is not off the charts. This is not, if you're going to put me through 10 napkins, this thing better damn well be good, right?
Right.
And this was, it was okay. But here's the problem, Gordon. What we're trying to do too much in food these days really bothers me. We take something that's already great.
Right.
And we add something that's great, and we think that's going to make it doubly great.
No.
More times than not, it screws it up.
sometimes it's more than the sum of its parts, right? It just works the way it works. A cheeseburger just works the way. I don't need a cheeseburger that I can't get in my mouth because it stacks so high. It needs to be wider, not taller, but nobody seems to be addressing this.
There is beauty in simplicity.
Exactly.
This is all I'm saying.
Chris, thank you so much for some time, pal. We'll be listening to Bart and Carlin, of course, and all the other things, and I'll be watching Carlin's Corner Table because I'm always looking for something to eat.
It's always awesome to be with you, Gordon. Thanks, man.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Make sure to hit subscribe, leave a quick rating or review, download the episode so you never miss a minute. And we'll be back next week with a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.